if you can understand, or if you can show that you understand someone's problem better than they do, then they will tend to trust that you have the solution.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Recruiting Alchemy with me, Andy Simpson. Today's guest is the indomitable Ben Browning, founder and CEO at Resonant, LinkedIn influencer extraordinaire. I'm not quite sure if that's appropriate. Recruitment trainer, sales trainer, everything L&D and recruitment. And I think a man for our times based on what I'm seeing in the market today. So I'm really interested to hear a bit more about your background, but also about like what you're seeing in the market today, because I think the stuff you talk about on LinkedIn, I know resonates with a lot of my customers who are, I'm not saying they're struggling with BD, but it's become such a sharp focus for any leader is how do we approach it in today's world. So Ben, thanks for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Andy, thanks for having me. And thanks for the intro. Yeah,
was that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the only thing that I always get into conversations with people about is the pivot that I took with the business probably 18 months ago away from training.
Right.
And we'll probably get into a little bit around why that is. But Resonant really is a sales consultancy.
Yeah.
We focus on helping businesses achieve profitable and predictable growth with processes and systems at the core of their BD strategy that are built for the world we're operating in right now, really. Okay.
Well, I'm intrigued to learn more. We start every show with what we call the two beginnings. The first is the man, the myth, the legend, Ben Browning. Where did the story begin? And the second is really how and why you made the leap to start your own business. Many of the people who listen to this show will be high-performing recruiters. They might be frustrated with maybe they'll have an entrepreneurial itch to scratch. Perhaps they have been thinking about starting on their own. So they're often looking for inspiration, education, ideation. But sometimes they're just looking to hear other people's tales about, was there a moment in time that led them to start their own company? So really, there'll be the two beginnings. And then after that, I would really like to spend some time focusing on, what you're seeing in the world today, because that's certainly, I think, topical and relevant. So yeah, back to the beginning.
Yeah,
where are the Brownings from?
The Brownings are from a town called Gosport down on the south coast, close to Portsmouth, or between Portsmouth and Southampton. And I grew up with the one of the formative experiences, and one of the things that kind of leads to where I am now is that my dad and my uncle ran a double glazing business in the 80s that ultimately
white gold.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah. The whole thing. My uncle was the MD. My dad was the sales director, and I was fascinated as a child, kind of with these two grown-ups. So I spent all of my time with. Spent absolutely tons of time with my uncle. Really close. Lived in the town locally with us. I was fascinated by how these two individuals built a local business empire from my child's perspective. Yeah. And it really got me thinking and got me really intrigued about how people build businesses, how people drive businesses. So I always had this interest in entrepreneurship from a young age. So,
amazing.
Yeah.
And so, surrounded by entrepreneurs, you living on the south coast.
Yep.
Uni.
Yeah, I did go to uni.
Yeah.
I went to did business studies at college. I actually got kicked out my first year in college.
Nice.
Didn't do anything particularly bad. Just didn't do anything at all.
And they were like, out.
Yeah, they were like, we're not having this. Very good school. So they were like, yeah, we can't. If you're not gonna smash it,
yeah.
And then a bit like recruitment.
And then how did you find recruitment, or did recruitment find you?
Yeah, recruitment found me to a degree. I think it's fair to say that I fell into it. I was always interested, as I say, I had this kind of natural interest in how people build businesses. Did a business studies degree, came out of that, came back home, was looking at options, and opportunity to start out with Robert Half in Southampton kind of came up. Small satellite office of obviously a massive business.
Yeah.
Really interesting experience.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So doing finance recruitment into what the in a regional setting.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of around Southampton, around Hampshire, lots of manufacturing, kind of light manufacturing, and a variety of businesses, really varied actually, but predominantly kind of that manufacturing piece. Finance and accounting, mid to senior levels, nothing crazy.
But good, solid business, right? Plenty of demand.
Yeah, exactly. And like, just that whole commercial thing of running a business or running a desk, particularly in a smaller office. I think like, I remember one of my first experiences, like the first placement that I made was with a business who had not paid their bills previously. So my director came down and was like, look, Ben, how are you going to make sure they get paid? I said, I've got literally no idea. He said, right, what I need you to do, I need you to book a meeting and go there. And I'm not going to accept anything less than you leaving with a check for the amount they owe us. Now, fortunately, it was a part-time payroll person that I've managed to sort of squeeze in. I think the invoice was something like $4,000. So I booked this meeting. I'm like, bloody hell, what the hell am I going to do? So I went in, I sat down with the owner, I explained the situation. I basically put in the easiest terms I could, which is my director has told me that I've got to leave here with a check.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the client was the finance director, and I managed to leave with a check for the full amount. So I came back to the office, and first placement got paid with a check.
I love that.
So
that is old school, isn't it? Pay with a check.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so tell me about your early. Tell me about your journey in recruitment, the twists and turns of that. How did that work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, first 18 months were pretty brutal. I think I've been really open with this. Like I didn't find it easy. I didn't find it natural. Like it was really hard. By then my work ethic had kind of got better.
Yeah.
When you say it was at college, but
when you say you didn't find it easy, were you surprised by that? Because you said you'd grown up in this double glazing sales environment. Mm-hmm. Did you think you were just going to get it?
Yeah, I guess in a way I did, right? I think it's like that first work experience, right? It was that first role in the real world. And I think that because my dad and my uncle had been successful in their business, my experience of watching my dad sell, I remember there were days where I was off school for whatever reason. My dad would take him on his sales calls with him, again, very different world. But yeah, and my dad was like naturally charismatic. Like he sold on personality. He was a really charismatic guy, as was my uncle. And so that sales piece kind of came quite naturally to him. When I started picking up the phone and realizing I didn't have very much to say, it was really hard.
Right. Yeah. And so tough 18 months. You stuck it with it though.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, I stuck it for 18 months. Another really formative experience for me. I was speaking to a guy called Neil Owen, who you might know, who's an advisor in the industry, the other day actually. We were talking about the Robert Half pipeline teardown. I don't know whether you had anything similar at S3. I suspect you probably did.
You probably did it, yeah.
Certainly running a perm desk, right? So I was running a perm desk, and I go into these monthly kind of weekly work in progress meetings with my boss, and she'd be like, right, so how much are you forecasting for the month? I'd be like, yeah, I reckon 50 grand.
Yeah.
And she'd go, well, where are you at with that? I'm like, well, I've got one person at first interview. And she's like, well, we can assume that's zero. I'd go in with a 50k pipeline and come out with, what she was forecasting was about 3 grand, which was a fun experience. But I did that roller coaster, then moved to London and joined a business called Puglia. It's Puglia Parker Bridge.
Parker Bridge,
yeah, exactly. That was brilliant because I'd gone from working a team of 7 or 8 of us to an open sales floor with probably upwards of 100 consultants across 5 divisions.
Right.
One floor, banks of desks. It was absolutely fantastic. Like the energy, completely different level. And started to build well and kind of do all right in that kind of environment. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So how long were you there for?
I was there for a few years.
Yeah.
Kind of worked up to senior consultant.
Yeah.
Then ultimately moved to a boutique because I kind of done that thing and I felt like got a bit more to offer, and actually went off in search of a bigger commission scheme.
Yeah.
Took a managerial role as well, so started building a team at that point, and that's where I think my recruitment career, kind of agency side, really took off.
Yeah, and then you went over to the dark side.
I did,
for a brief period. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so one of my clients was EY. They were talking about the fact that they were running a project to review their PSL. They wanted more people with agency background and more experienced agency recruiters to come in and look at that and be part of that review. They were going through quite a big process of really working out how that TA team was set up and would operate. And that was about like 2017, 2018. So it's kind of quite a big change in kind of focus at that point. So I went in and worked with them for best part of 2.5, nearly 3 years running this project too. The first driver was to work out how best they could engage with agencies and who they should be talking to. I also had some recruiting responsibility as well, so building out some quite interesting teams. But again, the key experience from that was being taking cold calls and taking cold emails every day for the best part of 3 years. So really being on that client side, on the receiving end of BD.
And was that, do you think, the embryo for what is now Resonant?
Yeah, 100%. Like I'd always had this feeling that the way that recruiters, particularly the way we were approaching things at scale at Puglia, was, now I see it as kind of reducing the recruiter's message, reducing the value of recruitment to the lowest common denominator, right? We've got a candidate, we can get them in quickly, we can get them in as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
The whole kind of reduction, commoditization
the ultimate transaction, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is fine when you're doing that at scale. But then when you see that from a client or the receiving end, and every recruiter is promising to be different, but they're all actually making the same promise in terms of speed of delivery, convenience, and quality of candidate. It's just like there's nothing, like I knew at that point that my sense was that the way I'd been selling and been taught to sell was kind of self-defeating, actually, was actually making me more comparable against all of my competitors. And I wanted to go back and share that message back in the agency environment and really help a business grow with that knowledge and by pursuing different strategies. Yeah.
And did you ever consider going back into agency, or did you always think, I want to, was that advisory consultancy piece in you? Tell me about that.
Yeah, again, I knew by that point that I saw the recruitment agency environment as an entrepreneurial type environment, but I also knew that as a consultant, as much as I ran my own desk and was the CEO of my own company within a company, like it never really scratched that entrepreneurial itch enough for me. Between EY and setting up on my own, I spent about 4 years as the one of the L&D leads at a company called Venn Group.
Yeah.
And I took that role specifically to take this experience that I'd had at EY and then kind of play it back into the market. I was really keen to leverage that experience prior to kind of setting up on my own.
Got it. The L&D piece for you at Venn was about sales, is that right? Was it about, and that word means a lot to, it means different things to different people. But are you really talking about cold outbound? Are we talking about cold calls? Are we talking about sales as a holistic thing, selling to candidates? What in your minds, what are you doing at this point?
Yeah, my passion is client generation, right? My passion is value creation and how recruiters can create a competitive advantage for the employers that they work with.
Yeah.
Right. I care about candidate delivery, I care about candidate experience, but I don't get excited about it, right? The real passion is on the kind of BD side.
Got it.
And so at Venn Group, my exposure was kind of across the 360. I was working with consultants, training consultants across the whole piece, but really it was in that BD area that I could see. I could see, and what I say now and what I'm really clear on now is that most consultants, most competent recruiters with 12 to 18 months experience can sell.
Yeah.
They've got the skills to navigate a sales conversation. What they very often don't have, what they very often lack, is this clear systematic strategy and a world-class compelling sales story that are going to enable them to deliver that to the market, to get seen as an expert and get chosen as a trusted advisor. For me, it was the fact that the guys I was training didn't lack skill, didn't lack competence. They could navigate a conversation. They were doing it all the time with candidates. When it came to clients, they were struggling predominantly because they had nothing good to say.
Yeah. And I guess that brings us on to Resonant nicely then. You know, clearly the value proposition is central to the success or otherwise of the sales pitch. What's your take on that? Lots of companies with a muddled, confused value prop, or just none at all? Is that what you would say, or am I putting words in your mouth there?
Yeah, so we ran a report. We looked at data from 500 recruitment businesses. We ran this. The report ran between October and January, and we released the results back in March. And what we found was that of the respondents, 76% of consultants said they had no clear plan for business development. And further examples of that were found when we looked at 80% of consultants said they had no clear methodology for turning a phone call into a meeting or booking a meeting from a phone call. So there really is, like, borne out in the data and my anecdotal experience, this lack of clarity over how do we actually like do sales. You know, there's a real lack of coherent strategy in most businesses.
Because my instincts, when you said that, I start to think about BANTs or MEDPIC or some methodology. But actually, if your organization doesn't have a solution, a product, a compelling proposition, something, a USP, whatever you want to call it, a strategic lever that you can communicate articulately in 2 sentences to a prospect, there's no amount of sales methodology is going to help you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. And I look, it's difficult to know, right? But this is where the anecdotal piece comes in. So at this point, I probably work with, I don't know, let's say 2,000 recruiters. Within those businesses, if I started talking about MEDPIC or BANT or and BANT maybe less so, but certainly like anything that's sophisticated, we start talking about Challenger or Sandler methodologies.
Yeah.
To most people, that's way beyond the level. When I say, "Do you have a sales process?" they're not thinking, "Yeah," or "We don't use Medic in the way that I'd like us to." Right? They're thinking, "Actually, no. Like, I'm not sure when I'm on the phone call what comes next. I'm not sure when I'm in a meeting what comes next." My anecdotal experience is that's what's coming up more and more for recruiters, is a real lack of how do we run a sales, like, just think about it as a workflow, right? What are the steps? What are the steps that we need to take a client through in order to end up with a deal? And of course, part of that is born out of the fact that most recruiters approach the whole thing of value creation. They approach the whole process of sales really transactionally. Because at its core, recruiting is a transaction. So although we shy, like, people don't like to be considered as transactional. Ultimately, placing a candidate is a transaction.
So I think that exactly that, right? And I think if I think back to my days as a recruiter, you know, fundamentally the candidate was, in 90% of cases, it was the battering ram with which you would hit the door. And beyond that, and we were part of S3, we're a big business, big brand, but we didn't really have much more than that. You know, look, what we did have was great training and a ferocious culture, right? So, but my experience is that lots of people don't have that either. And I think if you have an absence of a really compelling products or strategy, and you have an absence of a ferocious training and culture and training program, it's like, well, it's really tough now. You know what I mean? If I'm the only person in the room making sales calls, or everyone's listening to what I'm saying, or I've just had the phone put down on me. So you work with recruitment companies. Is there a typical type of business that you would work with? Yeah,
they're predominantly mid-market, right? So they are somewhere between 10 and 80 heads on average, although we have got a couple of clients now who are at the more kind of 100 to 150 headcount, which is great and really exciting to be involved with those bigger businesses. And they tend to be a mix of both perm and contract and also at that kind of mid to senior higher level. So I guess to me that is, and I get caught out on this a lot when I'm kind of talking on LinkedIn, because to me that's what recruitment is, right? To me, less so Robert Half, but certainly Puglia or the boutique that I work for, they are my main sphere of reference when it comes to recruitment.
But it's interesting, you've worked in a gigantic business, a mid-sized business, and a boutique business. So you've seen a good spectrum of the industry. And I guess you can then, from the outside of the tent looking in, you see that in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. But I also love that mid-market space, right? Where they've got I'd refer to it as like organizational intelligence. Okay, so they've got a trading history, they've got relationships with their clients, they know what they're doing. Often they're kind of stuck around this rookie and the rainmaker dynamic, which basically means they've got one or two people, very seasoned recruiters who generate all the new business, and then the rookies are kind of either sourcing for that or doing a 360 role, but probably not generating as much new business as the owners would like. And some of what I do is almost like a translator between the language of the rainmaker to the world of the rookie. But I also think that those businesses have so much value to add. And that's a really big part of what we do.
Tell me a bit more about that then. You think they have value to add? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if we look at, if we take that idea that most recruitment businesses are like, the core of recruitment is transactional. You place a candidate, you get paid a fee. When I started out in recruitment, and it may well have been similar for you, right? Like I say, picking up the check from the client. And there was a fax machine in the office, and the guy that I sat next to in Robert Half in Southampton as well was a guy called Pete, who genuinely could fill a senior interim financial director or CFO type role within 5 phone calls, because he had a black book. He'd come in, he'd sit there, he'd play Minesweeper on the computer for a few hours. The phone would ring.
Every office had one of them, didn't they? That legendary recruiter did nothing, and it just banged up a 20 grand fee. You'd be like, mate, the guy does no work. Every office has got a Pete, mate. I love it. I was never Pete. I used to have to work for my money. But the picture I'm painting, right, is a world that no longer exists. With LinkedIn, and now with all of the AI tools on top of that, and just automation in general, sourcing candidates, whether or not you believe this, and I think that there's a market where this isn't true, but whether or not you believe it, like, employers are being sold this story that sourcing talent has never been easier and it's never been cheaper. And if you have the right combination of tech tools or TA or a LinkedIn license or a cheap recruiter, you can just fill your roles. And I think there's most, like, recruiters who argue against that are probably, there's some defense for that argument. But I also think increasingly recruiters have to do more to get away from the trap of transactional, which is that you can no longer command the kinds of fees that you used to be able to for simply filling a role that a client could if they, had an administrator with a recruiter license. Because I think that, I was saying on a previous episode that somebody said to me that for every recruitment business, your biggest competition is not another recruitment brand. It's the company believing they can do it themselves.
100%.
That is you've either got to let them try and fail or explain to them why it's incredibly difficult. And I think I agree with what you've just said there, which is that the industry is being sold, or is, of course, LinkedIn has a dog in this fight. So it's in their interest to convince, John Smith to spend $2,000 on an ad on LinkedIn. John Smith doesn't realize he's going to get 2,000 CVs, all written by AI that all look identical. And so you go, oh, well, now what do you do? How do you take those candidates down to a manageable number, like 20? Even 20 is a lot. You're gonna have a half an hour phone interview with 20 people. I mean, think about the coordination of that, never mind the interview itself, and so on and so forth. And I think people are, exactly as you said, are sold this fantasy that it's easy. And so I think that that's the opportunity, that exists for the recruitment business. But I couldn't agree more with you. So tell me more about the State of BD report came out in March, made a big splash. What was the kind of themes that emerged from that, or the threads that emerged from that you've seen that you think kind of really highlighted the state of the nation today?
Yeah, it was what was really interesting, what was really important to me about the data was that it didn't just become that I didn't become a hammer looking for nails and use the report just to support my message. I mean, my message, right, is that recruiters can step away from the transactional as a trap, and we might come back to that, but the only alternative to that is taking a transformational approach, really changing your client's hiring strategy, being a advisor, and actually becoming an expert advisor, meaning you get paid for your insights and your advice as a discrete product set away from recruitment. So there's this really big piece around recurring revenue and the DART model, which we might come back and get into. But I didn't want to use the data from the report just to articulate that point. I felt that was a bit self-serving. So I approached Sam, your CRO, to add his commentary. Also approached Neil Carberry from the REC, Dougie Lone from Sourcewhale, and the team over at Firefish as well to provide some commentary on the data. Shared the data with them and asked them what stood out. And amongst that data, a few threads came out. One was, and Neil Carberry from the REC picked up particularly on the thread around performance development and the fact that very few consultants, in fact, only 36% of consultants get coaching on a weekly basis. Less than 30% of consultants get to review call recordings at all.
Right.
And other statistics that kind of build that picture of a lack of development. I think the other one was only 42% of consultants get training that is based on a kind of methodology that they understand.
Right.
So they get tactical execution type training, as we've all seen, right? This is how you make a cold call, this is how you handle an objection. But when you think about that in kind of a strategic terms, there's nothing to glue it all together. So that was one part of the narrative. The other piece was then around tech adoption. Very low levels of people who are comfortable or who feel comfortable in recording videos, sending voice notes, those sorts of things, and a really low level of CRM adoption, with something like 34% of consultants saying that they regularly forget to update the CRM.
Right, okay.
So there's this really, and the other thing that I think is also really important about this is that at the other end of the scale, 84% of recruiters said they have strong positive beliefs about sales, and 85% of recruiters say they have strong positive beliefs about their value as a recruiter. So we are talking to an audience that is engaged. It's not like we were going to, talking to recruiters who are really struggling, failing businesses, who can't get it.
These are people who want to do well.
These are absolutely. These ambitious people who typically engage with the sort of content that we put out, interested in that narrative, who have strong beliefs about recruitment, but who are systematically, don't have a clear plan, aren't using the tech that's available to them, and aren't being supported to review their performance on a regular basis. So,
Do you think, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like in a downturn, L&D is the first thing that goes out the window. Do you know what I mean? Oh, well, we need to get rid of the trainer. Whereas ironically, it's when you need it most, right? And I feel like that shift, somebody once described it as jumping out of the sauna and into the snow. The let's call it the collapse of the market, late 22, early 23, happened faster than any other shift I think I've ever seen, right? I mean, it was just wiped out. Now, I think that was because it came from an unnatural high. It was also higher than we'd ever seen, but the drop-off was significant. And for a lot of organizations, they just didn't have the people or the culture to cope. The people weren't fit for purpose. They weren't able to be developed quickly enough. What was your experience around that time? Because some of the people I deal with, they were in various states of just outright panic. And look, in some cases, rightfully so, because a lot of them went bust.
Yeah.
Big offices, armies of people ill-equipped to do the job they now needed to do, big C-bills loans to be repaid, and so on and so forth. I'd love to hear your story as a sales coaching leader, evangelist, influencer in that space. You must have had some stories from back then.
Yeah, I think the main story, and as much as I want to look out at the market, I also reflect on what it led us to do as a business, like how we reacted, because I went from being effectively a freelance trainer and running running L&D programs to very rapidly recognizing that people were honestly wasting money on training. I've said this before, like whilst there is an underinvestment at the industry-wide scale in training, in some businesses there is an over-reliance on training as a catalyst for growth.
Right.
Businesses where they bring it. Here's the archetype for this. Someone reaches out to me and says, "Hey Ben, we want to improve performance. We need some training for our guys." I go in and work with the guys, and the guys know what they need to. They know like how to navigate a sales call. They know how to write a sales email. There's nothing like vastly outside of their skill set there. But it's about what is the message? What is the sales story? How are they actually aligning their approach to sales with with the buyer's journey? Like how are they thinking about multi-threading, for example? We still see most recruiters, when it comes to the idea of bringing HR into the sales conversation, is like that's not the done thing. They want to fly under the radar. They want to keep it tight, keep it clean, right? And make placements. But actually when we look at it from the other perspective, we can show them that if they want to do if they want to do more than £50,000 worth of business with an individual company, they are at some point going to encounter between 3 and 7 decision makers in that process.
Yeah.
And so this idea of flying low, keeping under the radar, getting the foot in the door and then working their way up is less effective than coming in with a much more sophisticated, valuable and valued approach to the way they look to win that client in the first place. About that value-centric selling and solution selling is a really big part of what we see work well.
And is that a trend that are people already on that journey, or is that a journey people are trying to go on, do you think?
It's a bit of a mixture. Yeah. It's why I run the podcast. So I also host a podcast called Recruiting Better. Yeah. And we look to do 3 things there. Like my interviews there are sometimes with recruitment business leaders, although rarely. Some of it is a deep dive into kind of what I describe as sales literacy, but the language process, like I talk a lot about sales process clearly. That podcast channel gives me an opportunity to get really specific on exactly what that means and what the structure of that looks like. And then the third kind of group of podcast episodes that we release is episodes with truly kind of global world sales leaders, people like Mike Weinberg, Anthony Iannarino, people who are, like the most sought after names and voices in sales worldwide that can then bring that and we can apply that lens to recruitment. So I think there is an audience for that, and there are people going on that journey, but there are other people who are looking around thinking, why is what we were doing before not working anymore? And who don't necessarily haven't quite connected that gap.
Yeah. And do you think technology has changed what works and what doesn't work, or do you still feel that good fundamentals are good fundamentals?
Yeah, I mean technology's killed email.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the email reply rates are so low, and the level of architecture that you need in order to make it work has really, really affected that. Yeah. I think at the same time, that's been caused because everybody's gravitated towards email, which leaves the phone as like a really a much more open channel than it was 5 years ago. We also see, I'm a massive advocate for video, voice note and visual outreach. The power of simply sending your clients a screenshot taken on your phone of a hand-drawn flowchart of their problems on the left, your solution in the middle, and the positive outcomes on the right. Scroll stopper.
Yeah.
Right? You just don't see it. It's a pattern interrupt. It's raw, it's visceral, and it gets people to read the previous message. It's those sorts of things create a real good impact from
do you know what? one of the things that I find, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but sales leaders. So I started investing in my personal brand a couple of years ago because I believed then, and I believe more than ever today, that the future of business, right, whether that's tech, recruitment, or any other business, is about brand. Because AI will take any technical moat you've got is over, right?
Yeah.
So your moat will be brand and reputation. Reputation is about trust, and trust is about exposure. We can't trust what we don't know. So your first job as a recruitment leader is to be known. Doesn't necessarily need to be the best, but you certainly just have to be known. And I'm amazed at how many people, I'm 44, right? How many people of my age are like, oh no, I don't do stuff on social media. And I'm like, that's weird, because you will smash the phone for 3 hours and get told to get lost time and time and time again. But if I ask you to put a video, if I tell you it's a good idea to put a video on LinkedIn, you'd be like, oh, no. That's too awkward for me. I'm like, bro, you're having 3-hour cold calling sessions every day. And I think for me, that cognitive dissonance between telling people to be brave and to, face it down and to lean into the challenge and all that. And I'm like, the truth is, a 25-year-old today doesn't really care about putting themselves out there on video. So you've got to kind of just either embrace it or not. And I always say to people, like, in my opinion, if you start a business in 2025, it starts with brand. It starts with founder brand, because that will make the job of your cold callers so much easier if they go, oh yeah, I know you. And it happens to me all the time, right? People go, oh, I've seen you on LinkedIn, right? And I'm great. That's kind of what I want, right? Because you may or may not know what I do, but I think if somebody called somebody in the UK and said they were from Hinterview, somebody would probably know who I am. Yeah. And that has taken a relentless amount of outreach, of kind of content. So to your point, I agree wholeheartedly. I think the modern arsenal is a multi-channel approach, with the phone at the heart of it, but with other things that kind of go around it.
Yeah, I mean, sales conversations and no progress is made in sales without one-to-one synchronous conversations, right? I ran a webinar. We had 150 odd recruitment leaders join us yesterday for a session on how to book more meetings. And I could run that session at any stage in the last 15 years, right? Yeah. There's nothing right now, and I think probably more than ever, we've gone through this process where recruitment was about your ability to find candidates. We then went to a place where actually, as LinkedIn started to become more of a major player, winning at recruitment became about brand. It actually became about parties and and socials and donut drops and all that kind of stuff, right? It became all about staying top of mind. In today's absolute digital bombardment, I had someone earlier on a coaching session say to me, yeah, I just want to, they're not recruiting now, they're going to be recruiting in 6 months. So I just want to find a way to stay at the top of their inbox. Like, you're the best you can possibly hope for is not landing in their spam. Staying top of their inbox. Yeah. That's not a thing. Yeah. So we're in this place where we've gone from, right, okay, delivery, execution, being able to find candidates was valuable. Next came the era of brand being valuable. I think clearly personal brand and being founder-led brand absolutely part of the current moment. But behind all of that, and I think what you're brilliant at with your content as well, the vulnerability and the authenticity of it, but also the sales story and the product market fit. I get a sense from conversations about 2.0 and where the business has been, that product market fit is a really big part of your journey. And I think the recruitment business leaders miss that. It has always been the case that if you've got the best candidate, you can make a fee. But now the businesses I see performing best are the ones where they really understand that employers expect something and need something more from a recruiter to justify their fee than simply placing a candidate. And the businesses who win are the ones who accurately predict what it is that those employers want that is more than the transaction, and deliver that story really clearly and really well. And that's the biggest part of the work that we do now, is helping businesses really establish product market fit between who do you sell to and what they actually want, and don't talk about your candidates for 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, right? The default position is I think, it's the lowest common denominator, right? Which is you've got a job, I've got a candidate. Mm-hmm. And I think it's like beyond that, beyond the vacancy, how can we work together? And I think that is something where we see companies just haven't thought about it.
Yep.
And actually what's interesting is, we talk a lot about productization, and for a lot of people, that's just a meaningless word. Mm-hmm. And the way that I use it is like, a food in a supermarket is a collection of items, mm-hmm. and you can buy those items, so fruits and vegetables and other bits, and you can take them all home and you can make a meal, mm-hmm. right? A product is where some of those items have been put together by someone else and are available to purchase off the shelf. And the key thing about that product is I need to be able to pick it up and almost instantly identify whether it's suitable for my needs. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens in the fear of the solution cell, which is, what's your problem? Well, what do you need? Maybe I've got it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's a line with that, mm-hmm. before eventually you have to sit on your own hill and defend it and say, well, look, this is who we are and this is how we work. And these are the products that we offer. Are any of them suitable for you, yes or no? Mm-hmm. Rather than tell me your problem and I'll find a way to tell you that I've got a solution.
Yeah, right.
And I think the problem is a lot of that is built on a pillar of sand. Mm-hmm. And then it's very, very hard to sell with any vigor or energy or belief something you've just invented in a moment. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
And I think lots of recruiters fall into that trap of they think the solution cell is, I ask you loads of questions, you give me loads of pain, and then I solve your pain with some ideas that I've just invented in my head. And there's skilled recruiters can do that, but it's not necessarily sustainable or scalable.
Oh, 100%. And I remember that you were talking about this with Sam in the first episode of the podcast, right? Where you were talking about productization.
Yeah.
And you were talking about actually how so much of what recruiters claim is exactly the same thing. It's wafer thin. It doesn't actually mean anything. We say we've got the best candidate in the market. The client says, great, I'd love to see him. We say, actually they've gone, but I can find you somebody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in that episode, the example that I actually used was when I was in recruitment, and I'm not scared to say this, we would say, can we have the job on exclusive? Mm-hmm. And the client would say, and then we say, because if you give me the job on exclusive, let me tell you all the things that I can offer you. I can go to my FD and get sign off for a delivery team of 5 people. Not true.
Yeah.
I can access X, Y, and Z. Not true. And you end up in a place where you're basically telling, at best, some half-truths, mm-hmm. and at worst, an assortment of just outright lies.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody, right, is going to be inspired mm-hmm. to work for an organization and go the extra mile and win and succeed if their proposition is invented. So if that's the challenge I always say is, if I said to you, why should I work with you on exclusive? And your answer is a load of nonsense, that would be the red flag that it's time to go back to the whiteboard in the HQ and say, who are we? Because before we invest in training for 1,000 recruiters, we need to work out what the fuck we're doing.
And that is so true for my lived experience as well, both as a consultant, picking up the phone and BSing my way to the results that I was being pressured to get. Training people not only to go to market with a very thin and often untrue kind of sales message, but also like the reason that I'm still in this industry, given lots of opportunities to step away, is because I truly believe that a recruiter has the ability, or a recruitment business and an individual consultant has the ability to transform hiring into a competitive advantage for a client. And in 2025, the biggest asset that any business can have is their ability to recruit top talent. It is everything else is a level playing field. Technology is advancing in a way that levels the playing field for so many people. Your ability to hire key talent is crucial. And although employers can do that, the highest performing recruitment team I've ever worked with was the TA team at EY, right? So like, just to put this in context. But agencies have a huge amount of organizational intelligence about what it takes to recruit well, and loads of data and insight and advice that they can share that, when deployed effectively, can transform hiring into a competitive advantage. And when I was on the phone as a recruiter, and when I was as a kind of training people to do BD, that wasn't the message that we were putting out there. And when it becomes the message that recruiters take to market, when recruiters stand in front of their clients and say, how do you measure if in 12 months' time, recruitment is as good as you can possibly imagine it being for your business, it is a driving force behind the success in your business, how will you measure its effectiveness? Like, how will you know that it's working? And that doesn't come down to we've filled our jobs. That comes down to, yes, it might come down to time to hire, cost of hire, quality of hire. It probably more likely comes down to things like we'd have better internal stakeholder alignment. We'd have a greater time or a shorter time to impact. So the people that we hire, not only we hire them quicker, but they're up and performing quicker. There's all these different metrics that, for me, the truth about like solution selling, people miss this, is they think it's about the solution. It's not. It's about understanding the problem. Understanding the problem comes from the metrics.
Yeah.
And there's this phrase I like. Conscious is a long answer to the question. There's this phrase that I really like, which is, if you can understand, or if you can show that you understand someone's problem better than they do, then they will tend to trust that you have the solution. And so we see this all the time. When you can say to somebody, you tell me how you would measure really highly effective or highly successful recruitment, and I will show you how our approach drives success by that measure, then we're solution selling, then we're really cooking.
Yeah. If I'm a recruitment leader, what's the fastest thing that I can do today for free that's not going to cost any money that can help me improve sales performance from the top down?
I'm going to give you two things if I can. One is a strategic play, and the second one's the tactic that helps deliver that. The strategy is to change the game from focusing on being the person that your client comes to when they need to hire, to being the only person that they trust to give them advice around hiring. So really flip it from a transactional approach to a transformational approach. And by transformational, I mean that recruiters who position themselves that every time they work with the client's experience of hiring gets better. We talk about these metrics and the ways that you track success in recruitment. Businesses whose narrative is, look, I can't deliver a perfect hire every single time because I don't know what your expectations of perfect are. But what we will do, what we set out as a goal to do, is that over the next 6 months or 12 months or 5 hires or whatever it is, we will take you to a place where every single hire you make is incrementally better. And usually over 6 to 12 months, that gets you to a place where you're delighted by the outcomes. Right? That our goal is to transform your experience of hiring, not to promise a perfect hire like everyone else does and then leave you with exactly the same experience you've had for the last 20 years, but to create change. So that's the strategy, is to change the game from a transactional focus to one where we're thinking about transforming recruitment, and we're focused on becoming the trusted advisor. Anthony Iannarino, great sales author, talks about this as level 4 value creation. Being level 1 is you're a supplier. Level 2, you're a preferred supplier. Level 3, you're, I don't know, like a approved supplier or something. Level 4, you're a trusted advisor. Most people try and come in, foot in the door, and work their way up. Statistically, it's proven that's a very slow and ineffective way of building a business. What we want to do is come in level 4 and be a valued partner right from the start. There's a lot of narrative at the moment about how recruitment businesses should set up more like professional services businesses. Professional services business, most of what they sell, like the highest volume of what they sell, is low value insight-based products. And that brings us to a tactic, which is every recruitment business that I work with that does really well sells a insight data-based product, some kind of recurring revenue product, whether it be monthly, quarterly, something in between, where they're consistently delivering value to their clients and they are starting a conversation around their insights and advice rather than their ability to recruit.
I think that's great advice. And on that note, we'll call it a day there. Ben, thank you very much for coming in. It's been a real pleasure to meet you. And I'd love to do it again sometime, maybe a year from now, to see where the industry's at then. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. It'll be a real pleasure to be back. And thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Pleasure. Cheers, Ben.